Today, we're talking about an extremely interesting new rumor about an upcoming Black Ops 7 Zombies DLC map, and it specifically being a remake map, but not any of the obvious choices of classic Zombies maps that have yet to get a remake. Now, with any leaks and rumors, we need to take everything with a big grain of salt, because until it's officially confirmed, we don't know how true or false this is. But regardless if it is true or false, this has the community in a frenzy, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this in the comments below. But this rumor comes courtesy of TheGhostofHope, who has one of the cleanest track records for Call of Duty inside information. He is very rarely ever wrong with his leaks, but I still definitely take this with a little pinch of salt. And I honestly have no words for this leak in all honesty, but Ghost of Hope is saying that multiple sources have told him that Black Ops 7 Zombies is going to have a remake Zombies map, and the remake map is Alpha Omega from Black Ops 4 Zombies. You heard me right. He said that Alpha Omega is being remade as one of the 5 round-based maps in the post-launch seasons for Black Ops 7 Zombies. And again, let me just reiterate, Alpha Omega is being remade according to the Ghost of Hope. I really don't know what to say about this. I really don't. There's probably some of you watching this video that have never heard of this map before, maybe even have never seen it or never played it. So the gist of Alpha Omega is simple. It is a remake of the original Nuketown Zombies from Black Ops 2 Zombies. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that map, very familiar with that map. Alpha Omega was a full-on remake that expanded Nuketown Zombies to have substantially bigger play space in the above ground section of the normal Nuketown area we all know and expect, with expanded areas, expanded side areas, such as other houses before the classic cul-de-sac play space of Nuketown, and also for the first time had a huge underground bunker and research facility that we were able to explore, which up to that point was kind of like hearsay within the Ether storyline, where Martin in the bunker in the original Black Ops 2 Zombies Nuketown gave an impression that there could be some sort of underground bunker, and then it was finally realized in the map. But choosing to remake Alpha Omega in Black Ops 7 Zombies is definitely a choice, because this map came out in July 2019, so it's only 6 years old at the time of me making this video, and it definitely doesn't hold a candle in the eyes of the community as other classic maps that have yet to get remakes does, like Buried, even Die Rise, and then the entirety of Black Ops 3's maps, your anniversary, where so much time has passed that any of those maps could be fit for a remaster or a remake at any point. And for Black Ops 4, every single Ether story map in that game was a remake from an older map. We had 5 remade, we had Nuketown Zombies remade, we had Call of the Dead remade, we had Mob of the Dead remade. Pretty much every single classic Zombies map, bar Buried and Die Rise and Transit in a way until Ashes of the Damned, had yet to be remade. So out of any maps that could have been remade, that was kind of the community's expectation. So for this to just come out of absolutely nowhere and for Alpha Omega to be the map that we're apparently getting as a remake in the game is definitely a choice, and I've seen the response already, and I would love to know your thoughts in the comment section about this, because I know this is not a popular map to remake by any stretch of the imagination. I have no idea what Treyarch are cooking if this is the map that they have indeed chose as the map to remake, but there are so many different ways to look at this scenario, starting off with why they would choose Alpha Omega out of any map that they could remake. Why have they chosen this and not Buried, Die Rise, Black Ops 3, or any other map from Black Ops 4, especially one that hasn't already been remade? And I guess that is the biggest confusing point to talk about here, because Treyarch, at least from what I can remember, has never ever remade a remake. I mean, the closest we've had is D Machine, which is a remake of Nacta and Toten, but heavily expanded upon it, and I think it was very, very successful. And Alpha Omega is a remake of Nuketown Zombies. It expanded upon it and added a lot more to it, but does a remake need another remake? That's where I'm kind of lost at this. I think ultimately the goal, if I was putting my Treyarch hat on, is if I was remaking something that had already been remade, the purpose would be for that remake to execute the original vision of the remake perfectly. We can look at Ashes of the Damned as a great example of a Transit remake. Treyarch has quoted multiple times that it is a inspiration from Transit and isn't necessarily a Transit remaster. It's not even necessarily a remake either, but but it's definitely inspired to have all the elements of transit, but to remix some of those core elements to be a little bit different, where we don't have a bus that drives around itself, you drive it yourself. Mechanics of the fog are back, but the fog sections are more meaningful. You can kind of see where I'm getting at, where if Ashes of the Damned is a remake of Transit, it's not necessarily a remake in the same vein as what we would expect a remake to be, where it is entirely its own unique thing at that point, to where you see that and you don't even think of Transit, like it's just unrecognizable as Transit. That is when a remake is successful, but a remake of Alpha Omega could look very different to what our initial expectations are when we hear the words remake. And I guess if you look at some of the more favorable maps that people would want to see remade, such as Mob of the Dead or Origins or Buried, there could be an argument made that those maps are as close to perfect in the games they were in than they could ever get. So if they were to be remade, as exciting as it would be, it wouldn't actually be able to make those maps any better than they already were. But the problem is that Alpha Omega at its core is just a pretty flawed map. There is a lot of things about it which people did not enjoy. Part of that is the tedious setup to get yourself underground and then activate the Pack-a-Punch. It also had very little that was original in terms of zombie types, zombie enemies. They were all completely reused. The main boss itself was the Avogadro from the original Transit, and the wonder weapons on the map weren't new either. They were the Ray Gun Mark II, but they were elemental versions, which pretty much are what we got inside of Shattered Veil in Black Ops 6 Zombies. Now, we have no idea what goes on behind closed doors in games development, but you could correlate that the Ray Gun Mark IIs that we saw in Shattered Veil seem very similar to the ones that are in Alpha Omega. What if they were from this Alpha Omega remake and instead repurposed for Shattered Veil instead? We may never know the answer to that question, but there definitely is a weird coincidence. Another thing people didn't like is that the color palette of the map was definitely more drab and a bit more dull. Once you got the power on, it did become a bit more vibrant, but the visual style of this map compared to the other maps in Black Ops 4, and even so far for Black Ops 7, Alpha Omega just isn't a very exciting map to look at. As mentioned earlier, this map also wasn't that fun to play, and that's because a little bit similar to Transit with that Pack-a-Punch setup, there's an element to setting up the Pack-a-Punch which is fairly easy, but then once you've set it up, at any point in later rounds, it would deactivate and you would have to go through and reactivate it yourself. And you'd have to do this every few rounds. And it was very frustrating and ultimately wasn't that fun of a gameplay experience. As also mentioned before, there were a ton of enemies that weren't new. They were just sort of remodeled. There was lightning hellhounds. There were jolting jacks. And you also had Nova crawlers and then Nova bombers. The only thing that was, in my opinion, redeeming about Alpha Omega and was the thing that was so strong about the map was the narrative aspect, which was so good for the Ether storyline, which is why I'm so curious if this is going to take place in Black Ops 7 Zombies. How is that going to tie in? Because I feel it has to tie in somewhat. There was some amazing things in Alpha Omega. We learned about the Avogadro and its origins. We learned about while Martin was on Nuketown. We learned about the origins of Ted the Robot. We learned about the 4th Marine in Verrückt. What happened to the Pentagon Thief after 5? This map really was where the writers Craig Houston and Jason Blundell really flexed super hard, because they wrote some really good narrative for this map. And what was also crazy is it was one of the only maps ever where we could play as 8 different characters, which is now the normal for us now in Black Ops 7 Zombies, but you could play as 4 Ultimus and 4 Primus and any variation of a mixed crew of Primus and Ultimus. And perhaps from that side of things, maybe that's another narrative point that Treyarch might want this 3rd iteration of these characters to experience. I don't really know. There's still just a lot of questions as to why this is even happening if it does end up happening. But another thing TheGhostofHope said is that Nuketown Zombies is being remastered as a survival map to go alongside this remake map. So if you're someone that does not care at all about the idea of Alpha Omega being remade, but wants Nuketown Zombies as a survival map, well, apparently that is going to be coming alongside of this. So there is some positives there. If you are a fan of Nuketown Zombies and you wanted that old school survival version, that sounds like it's coming back as well. But until Treyarch and Activision officially confirm this, this is just the rumor and nothing more. But it's another rumor to suggest that yes, we are indeed getting 5 maps for the DLCs, which is very exciting. And from code names that have leaked through for each DLC map in the code, it does also reference 5 of them. So Astra Malorum is our first one, but we're getting 4 more, which is a crazy amount of content to be getting. And we'll just have to see if Nuketown/Alpha Omega ends up being one of those maps. I'd love to know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Drop this video a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe, because Astra Malorum is literally days away and I've got a ton more BO7 Zombies videos coming out very, very soon. But why not check out this one on all the side Easter eggs on Ashes of the Dam so you can do them all ahead of Astra Malorum.